Hello, everyone. Welcome to Resistance Live for the 24th of July, 2025. The Dems have finally started taking the gloves off, and I'm kind of glad to see it. We'll see where this lands, but we've got a lot to talk about today, again, in the context of the Epstein news, which seems to be dominating pretty much everything these days in its own way. So lots to talk about there. Lots to talk about with regard to Galilea Maxwell and various developments in that arena. Lots to talk about in the context of the many, many distractions that the Trump administration continues to throw over here, trying to get us to kind of like observe other things. So welcome. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Elizabeth Cronise McLaughlin. I was a Wall Street and human rights lawyer for 15 years, and now I run the Gaia Leadership Project and specifically the Ripple Effect Institute, which helps people to figure out how they can make the biggest possible impact for the future of humanity right now. And of course, if you're interested in learning more about that, you can download our free guide, which is linked in the show notes on how to make an impact right now without burning out. All right. For our visually challenged viewers, I'm wearing a white puffy blouse today. My hair is down. I am a pink skin, green eyed, dirty blonde haired woman. I'm in front of my bookshelf and my yellow utility cart and coming to you as always from occupied Muncie, Lenape, and Mohegan land. All right. So yesterday in Congress, the Democrats kind of went off the rails, and I was really glad to see it. As you all know, because we talked about this yesterday, Mike Johnson announced that he was shutting down the House for summer vacation early and putting the House into recess until September to avoid a House floor vote that would demand the release of the Epstein files. Well, the Dems turned on a dime and did something really interesting here. In every outstanding committee meeting that was scheduled in advance of this particular break, they introduced new requests for information related to Epstein. It happened in the Finance Committee. It happened in the Oversight Committee. More on that in a minute. And happened on a couple of other committees that arguably had some means of control over the Epstein information. But the really interesting thing that came out of yesterday afternoon was that on the House Oversight Committee, the Dems, through Robert Garcia, who I adore, I've talked about him for so long, who's now the ranking member on House Oversight, they introduced two demands for subpoenas. And there was kind of a debate about whether or not these subpoenas were actually going to get approved by the Oversight Committee. And in fact, 3 Republicans, hell has frozen over, my friends, 3 Republicans crossed the aisle to vote in favor of these two subpoenas. So the subpoenas from House Oversight do not require a full House floor vote, okay? And essentially what these two subpoenas are seeking are two very different things. The first is testimony from Galilea Maxwell, which I'm just going to give you guys a heads up they're not going to get. I'll explain that in a minute. But they're going to issue a subpoena to her to come testify in front of House Oversight. The second subpoena they issued, which is truly kind of an unprecedented bombshell, is to the Department of Justice to subpoena the Epstein files. Now, I have to tell you that from a strategic standpoint, this is brilliant. Do I think the DOJ is going to comply with it? That's kind of anybody's guess, okay? But I will just tell you that it will not look at all good. And that's part of the reason why they're doing this, is the sort of political strategy of it. It will not look at all good if the DOJ defies a congressional subpoena. I mean, again, total violation of the rule of law and the law, period, if they do it. The ordinary way that you would seek to do this is you would file a new court action seeking to quash, I always have to say this, quash, not squash, quash is the legal lingo, the subpoena, okay? And one of the things that I want people to be aware of here is that I do expect that Galilea Maxwell's attorneys are going to file a court action like that to quash the subpoena. Why? Well, a number of reasons. She has a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, which of course she could invoke as she testifies. She also has been convicted of sex trafficking, for which we know she's serving 20 years in the federal pen. Her case is on appeal, and they're going to make an argument that because the case is on appeal, calling her to testify is going to result in no new evidence. She's already been convicted, and she shouldn't have to show up and answer questions. And I'm also just going to let you all know that even if she does, my prediction is that she's going to take the fifth for all of it, okay? And that is because she doesn't want to incriminate herself further. Now, let me just say one thing about this whole thing. Again, because I kind of went off on a tangent on this yesterday, and you should go back and watch yesterday's broadcast if you didn't see everything I have to say about this. Nobody should be believing that Galilea Maxwell is going to tell the truth, okay? No one should be believing that even if she shows up to testify in front of the House Oversight Committee, that she's going to actually say anything that implicates Donald Trump, okay? But the subpoena to the DOJ as its own unique animal raises very interesting strategic questions for the GOP, for the Trump administration, for Trump himself, in the context of some things that we now know again have been confirmed. Okay, so there was another little bit of breaking news on this yesterday, which you might have missed. For the last few days, we've talked specifically about how Allison Gill has been getting inside information about the review of the Epstein Files by the DOJ and the FBI. Well, hold on to your hats, because as you may know, Donald Trump was asked back in May if his name was in the Epstein Files, and he said, no, nobody's told me that my name was in the Epstein Files. No, absolutely not. Turns out Pam Bondi, this was reported yesterday, Pam Bondi literally told the president of the United States that his name was all over the Epstein Files in a meeting in the Oval Office in the White House. Okay, so he knows his names are in the file. And I don't know that we needed any kind of prior or subsequent confirmation of this, right? Because we already have all these leaks coming out of the DOJ and the FBI now saying that they've been asked to record every single instance when Trump's name appears in the records in a particular Excel file that they have to turn in at the end of every document review shift. We know this. Nonetheless, the cover-up, as it currently is running, very clearly runs all the way to the top. Trump knows he's in those files. Pam Bondi knows he's in those files. And they tried to wipe the whole thing under the rug, claiming, oh, there's nothing in there, which is how we got to this place in the first place. All right. So from the standpoint of where things sit right now, it's very clear that the Dems are playing hardball. And again, like I said at the top of the broadcast, I really appreciate it. The other thing that happened yesterday with all these new little requests and motions that were put into place in all the subcommittees is that the Democrats shut down any other actions in the entire House of Representatives by doing this. Because the committees knew, committee heads, Republican committee heads, knew that these requests were coming, and in some instances, adjourned the whole meeting so that they didn't have to have a vote on these motions by the Democrats. So they're taking everything very seriously on the Democratic side, finally, which I'm really glad to hear. Okay, so the other thing that is happening today, apparently, is that Todd Blanch, yes, that Todd Blanch, who defended to a total loss Donald Trump on his 34 felony indictments for interfering in the 2016 election vis-a-vis Stormy Daniels, that Todd Blanch, who is currently the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, every single time those words leave my mouth, I'm horrified, is meeting today with Galilea Maxwell at the prison where she is serving time. Now, again, I am going to remind you that Galilea Maxwell is not just a recruiter for Jeffrey Epstein, okay? She herself was actively engaged in the abuse of these girls. And she is serving 20 years in the federal pen after spending years in hiding after Epstein was indicted the second time and then died. Okay. So all of this is not something, again, I have to remind everybody, this, I'm not expecting literally anything to come out of these interviews or this testimony by her that is going to be at all reliable. She is entirely self-interested. She wants to get out of prison. She will, as we all know, do anything, say anything to avoid accountability. And so people should be assuming that, she's going to lie about everything. And I would not be surprised if there's breaking news out of this meeting today that, she implicated X, Y, and Z, Democrat electeds, Democratic donors, people on the left. Not a word about Donald Trump. That's what everybody should kind of expect out of it, right? And from the standpoint of what the DOJ is trying to do here, no matter what Blanche says or Bondi says about nobody's above the law, we talked about this yesterday, do not expect anything to come out of this because literally they're all actively engaged in a cover-up, okay? And again, I'm going to say this because it needs to be said. She was involved. The allegations now, by the way, just so everybody knows, in addition to the thousands of videos and photographs that we now know are contained in the Epstein files showing child sexual abuse, the allegations now are that there are potentially more than 1,000 victims in this case. 1,000 girls. 1,000 girls. So I am kind of like over the people who are like, pardon Maxwell, give her immunity. We should hear from her. Can she go to another country and tell us everything then? This person was engaged for decades in some of the most amoral, illegal activity imaginable. She ruined lives. I mean, like, let us not forget that Virginia Giuffre just committed suicide in April, right? Decades after being victimized. I've written a lot about this, and the experience of this and how it utterly changes the trajectory of your life. She should not be getting any kind of a special deal. And I'm just going to say one thing. I know there are people who are claiming like she was the mastermind of the whole thing. I don't really care, right? Like I think that there's a way in which like the speculation about this is ridiculous, okay? She's been convicted of sex trafficking. We don't need to know, like, was it Jeffrey's idea to go recruit little girls from summer camps, or was it Ghislaine Maxwell's idea? Who cares? Like, who cares? Like, to me, what's relevant about the current moment is this. Donald Trump was best friends with Jeffrey Epstein. His name is in these files, all over these files, apparently. We don't know what's in the videotapes. We don't know what's in the photographs, and the American public deserves to know. With all the necessary protections for the identities of the victims. Like that, by the way, is something that continues to really irk me, that people are throwing these ideas around without like talking about any of the protections for these victims. And I'm just going to tell you something. We know the identities, or the public and law enforcement know the identities of about 150 of these victims. Okay, if there were 1,000 victims, that means 850 girls who were victimized don't need or want their identities, these photographs and videotapes of them being abused and harmed. And like, I mean, I can't even, like, people have got to get their heads screwed on straight about this. Okay. What is relevant to this moment is not the idea that this is some salacious sex scandal. Okay. What we're talking about here is the rape of children, videotapes, photographs of the exploitation and rape of children. Okay. And what we need to know is Trump's involvement in it. So like, people got to get like really, really, really clear about the scope of why we're here, and stop falling for the idea that somehow there's going to be like a magical smoking gun out of Galilea Maxwell, or talking about this in salacious terms about what's in, I mean, we're talking about like really serious crimes, right? Like really appalling, disgusting, amoral, damaging, traumatic crimes. And, to me, one of the things that I just have to say about all of this is that, like, we have to stay on it. We have to stay on it through the right lens, right? Yes, we want the files disclosed. I still want protection for the victims, right? I don't want to see the faces of these little girls. I don't think anybody should, right? Nobody needs to know their names. But we do need to know the men involved. We do need to know the role that the president played in this entire multinational sex trafficking of children scheme, right? That's what we need. So I want everybody to kind of get very clear on that, and also to really lower your expectations about anything having to do with Ghislaine Maxwell, anything having to do with this interview. The DOJ, Todd Blanch, Pam Bondi cannot be trusted, and neither, by the way, can Maxwell herself. So we got to keep moving in the direction of like subpoenas. We have to keep moving in the direction of like great independent journalism that's like procuring critical information through leaks, right? That's the stuff that we need. And, people need to get very clear on how this is all going to work. All right. Related to this, we had some questions on the Patreon feed this morning. Reminder, if you want to support this broadcast and also ask me questions and have me answer them on the air or in writing, you should go become a paid subscriber over at patreon.com/resistancelive for as little as $5 a month. That's less than 20 cents a broadcast. I had some questions over there this morning about Maurene Comey. I addressed this actually last week very briefly, but let me just go into it in a little bit more detail. Maurene Comey, daughter of Jim Comey, was the prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, who was assigned to one of the prosecutors who was assigned to the Epstein case. And she was summarily fired by Donald Trump last week. Another part of the cover-up, and a revenge tour, right? Just fired, okay? Lots of people have been asking, and a few people asked this morning on the Patreon feed, can't she just come out and tell everything that she knows? No, she absolutely cannot, okay? There are ethical constraints about what DOJ attorneys and former DOJ attorneys can share about what's contained in evidence that is collected in investigations, all right? Again, I think that there's a lot of pie in the sky edging on titillating, salacious demand for details here that makes me really uncomfortable. She is not going to give a tell-all interview about the evidence that was collected in this case that did not result in a prosecution or an indictment, okay? And again, I have to remind you, when the DOJ is acting ethically, they are not allowed to comment, much less release evidence in ongoing investigations or related to investigations that did not result in an indictment. So again, let that one go. And, I have to say that, again, I feel like people need to really narrow their focus here on what it is that we're after, right? What we need to know is if Trump's in the files, who else is in the files, who he might be covering for, and that's it, right? So, that's my 2 cents on that. All right. We've had a lot of efforts at distraction. The latest effort on this front, it's hard for me not to laugh at this, but also it's simultaneously horrifying. The latest distraction on this front was that Tulsi Gabbard got up at the press briefing inside the White House and claimed that Obama had engaged in treason, which, by the way, is punishable by death, by quote unquote interfering in the 2016 election. Okay, so first things first, okay, meaning what they refer to as the Russia hoax. Okay, the crazy thing about this is that Marco Rubio, as a senator, signed off on a report documenting not only that Russia had engaged in interfering in the 2016 election, but also not in any way implicating Barack Obama. Okay. And Obama's office, which never comments on any of this shit, apparently decided that they had to on this. And we're like, this is ridiculous. This is all a distraction. We know what this is. Okay. The thing I want everybody to be aware of with all of this is that, notwithstanding that they claim they've got some strike force going right now that's going to investigate whether or not the 2016 election was interfered with by the Democrats, and he won, right? This is not a case that is going to hold any water or weight in the event that they actually try to indict Obama. All right. I know people panic about stuff kind of on a hair trigger these days because there's a lot to panic about. All right. But this is literally just a shiny object. You should worry about Obama being executed for treason moment that is designed to do nothing but take people off the track of Jeffrey Epstein. And they've been doing this now for weeks, right? They've done this with all sorts of different topic areas. And they're trying to find something that sticks because the walls are closing in on Donald Trump. He is acting like a caged animal, and they're lashing out in really crazy ways to try to get the public, and particularly his base, to focus on anything but the fact that they are trying to bury his involvement with Jeffrey Epstein. So this is not something that anybody should be worrying about. Is it off the rails fascist threats? Yes. But what it really is an attempt to distract from Trump's involvement with Jeffrey Epstein and his pedophile ring. That's all it is. Okay. So nobody should kind of freak out about it. All right. Columbia University agreed yesterday to pay a $200 million fine. Okay. I'm sorry. I just have to pause for a second here because you all know I used to teach at Columbia University, right? Or many of you do. I taught in the law school there for 2 years. And Columbia University has some very good lawyers on staff, really incredible law professors, people who still practice in other arenas. I was still practicing on Wall Street while I was teaching at Columbia University. And this whole thing is just despicable. I mean, there's kind of no other way to put it. Columbia University has not done anything wrong, all right? Like, I just want to, as with many of these other like bribery / settlements that have originated from various arenas in the second Trump administration, the allegations against Columbia University, particularly with regard to Palestinian protesters, actually tilted in favor of punishing protesters while it was ongoing. And so the claim that somehow they owe $200 million to the Trump administration for not doing the right thing in relation to Palestinian I mean, like, it's garbage. It is a garbage allegation. It's trash. Let alone to like then be like, oh, I guess we're going to pay $200 million to the Trump administration to leave us alone. Like it ever works like that, right? Like, I think we already know, Columbia University actually already knows that past is prologue in this instance, that once you cave to this administration, it's 2 weeks or a month before they're making another crazy allegation against you that you then have to cave to at a higher number or by giving away more of your authority. Like this whole deal has now allowed the Trump administration to have secret police on Columbia's campus. Like, it's mind-blowing, like absolutely mind-blowing. And I can't imagine, I mean, I can, but what the experience of this is like for current professors at the law school, because no lawyer with half a brain would ever recommend that Columbia University agree to something like this. Like, they are capitulating to a threat. They are, by the way, also setting, in some sense, a social precedent that universities should cave to the Trump administration when wild, out of left field, completely nonsensical, not based in fact, allegations are made about what the university is doing in relation to its students. So it's just gross. And, you know, I'm watching lawyers right now, like I think it was Kimberly Atkins-Stoll this morning, who was like, I want to give back my diploma, right? I mean, I can't, like, I had a moment when I saw this where I was like, I spent those 2 years like teaching in the law school on that campus, you know, dealing with like incredibly accomplished colleagues, folks who, you know, were among the best lawyers in the nation, right? Because like, it's not easy to actually teach at Columbia, by the way. Like, you know, there's a whole rigorous process you have to go through. You know, to bear witness to something like this, having previously been affiliated with that university, is just, I don't know that I even have the words for it. It's horrible. Like, it's just horrible. And the way that it sets up a future for academia in this country is foul, right? And, you know, we all know that part of Project 2025 and part of fascism generally is to dismantle higher education and limit its access only to the super rich, wealthy, privileged folks, right? But this in and of itself is so unnecessary. Like, Columbia could have gone to court and been like, no, right? They could have been like, we're not capitulating to this. And instead they agreed to pay $200 million. Like, it just has left me speechless. Like, I don't really even know what to do with it. It's really bad. Yes. And as somebody's pointing out, it also has the best journalism school in the country. Jelani Cobb is the dean. Like, I don't even know. I don't know how you reconcile it. Anyway. Okay. We have some news in the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case. So 2 very interesting things happened yesterday, 2 minutes apart, like literally in very, very tight succession. The first is that the judge in the federal court in Memphis, who is overseeing the prosecution of Kilmar Abrego Garcia on this trumped up trafficking case where they like literally have no evidence. They didn't even give him a ticket. Ordered Kilmar Abrego Garcia released from custody on supervised release, okay, which is essentially like ankle monitor, okay? 2 minutes later, Judge Zinnes entered an order saying that the federal government cannot detain Kilmar Abrego Garcia in an attempt to deport him during this release period. And that if they intend to, they have to give Judge Zinnes 72 hours notice. Okay. Now, this is all very good news, right? Like, as I said yesterday, I really like it when the judicial system works like this, because the end result of this is going to be that Kilmar Abrego Garcia is finally going to get home to his family in Maryland. Okay. That's what's happening. However, there is a minor delay on this, and it is actually at the hands of Kilmar Abrego Garcia's lawyers. So they requested in Memphis that if the judge agreed to release him pending trial, that it be deferred for 30 days. And they did that because they wanted to protect him from being picked up by ICE the second he walked out of jail. Now, of course, that we have Judge Zinnis's order in place, they may not need those extra 30 days. So the judge in the Memphis case referred the release order to a magistrate judge, which is a judge in the federal court system who is like responsible for handling things like basic discovery, sometimes like additional motions practice, like lower level judge than a federal district court judge, handles mostly like administrative requests. Okay. They deferred it to the magistrate judge for 30 days, but you know, Abrego Garcia could be out like in a couple of days if his attorneys agree that they no longer need the 30-day period. All right. So we will see what happens next, but it's looking an awful lot like Kilmar Abrego Garcia is going home. And that's huge. I mean, when you consider the many, many months of this, when you consider the testimony now that is coming out of folks who were at SECOT with him, because some of the people who were sent to Venezuela have now started talking to the press. By the way, huge trigger warning on this, like, you know, enormous violence, like it's Abu Ghraib all over again. It's just unbelievable what happened to these men, most of whom, like virtually all of whom, have never been accused of a crime. What happened to them at SECOT? It's astonishingly bad. So my hope is that Kilmar Abrego Garcia is going to be released. He's going to be on supervised release. He's going to be back with his family. And also that, you know, this is the other thing. There can be some form of protective custody. We're going to have to see what happens with that. Which would prevent him from being, you know, otherwise attacked by the general public and other means of being persecuted by the federal government. So we'll have to see. Right now, he's in the custody of the U.S. Marshals, pending release. So good news there, tentative good news, and hopefully he will be out and home with his family soon. Somebody asked a question on the Patreon feed about what's coming out of the various concentration camps, like what we know about the Everglades concentration camp, for which I will never use their cutesy propagandist name. You know, flooding, sewage, rotten food, right? Which, by the way, I always have to say when we talk about this, these are conditions that exist in U.S. prisons regularly. Like, everybody should be waking up to the fact that, like, the prison industrial complex does this routinely in the United States, like, not just to immigrants, but to U.S. citizens, okay? Like, this is not new. But somebody asked, like, how do we get footage out of what's happening there? Do we need photographs? That transformed like the Vietnam War. Well, so part of the problem here is that oversight is being attempted routinely by U.S. and state officials, right? Just like what happened here in New Jersey at Delaney Detention Center when Ross Baraka was arrested. Now LaMonica Ivor is being prosecuted. And, you know, those people were trying to do their jobs. The same, by the way, has been true in Florida. Maxwell Frost, for instance, has gone to the Everglades concentration camp and toured it, right? And seen what the conditions are like, and came out horrified because there were people there shouting that they were U.S. citizens. There was chanting inside that concentration camp of libertad, libertad, like freedom, 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 right? Let us out, in other words. It's being documented by people who are bearing witness, but there is no way, and I don't think anybody should expect this, that ICE and CBP are going to let cameras into those facilities, other than for, like, you know, Kristi Noem's Instagram account. Okay. There's no way. And by the way, for those who are wondering, what's come out of SECOT in the testimony from the people who were there is that when Kristi Noem and others came down for those, like, you know, fancy like photo shoots to make them look like pretty fascists, they brought beds into those cells that were not there otherwise. And they made the conditions look better than they actually were. Those men were sleeping on metal plates with the lights on 24/7 and a bucket of water that they had to share for bathing and for like for washing and also for like cleaning any area. And they were given one opportunity a day to wash at 4 a.m. And if they were seen using that bucket at any other point, they were tied to a chair and beaten with batons. Like, it's bad. Okay. So no one should expect, if the press ever got in there for any reason, that they would actually get the truth. So, you know, again, this is one reason why what people coming out of these conditions are telling us is so important. Like this morning, there's a story about a Swiss woman who used to work in New York, who came to New York for her birthday. and she teaches English as a second language. And sometimes she's taught from other parts of the world, like over on the internet, right? Had no intention of working in New York over her birthday weekend when she was visiting her friends. She was stopped by ICE and brought to the detention center in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and held there. Like while she was there, she got her period. They didn't give her any menstrual supplies, bleeding out through her clothes, right? Couldn't reach anybody. And, eventually, after her friends found out what had happened, the Swiss embassy got involved and she was released. But the conditions that she has testified now, but like verbal testimony to The Guardian, I think it is, that, or maybe BBC, that while she was there, she met women, Venezuelan women who had been in the same room, like a gym-sized room with like open facilities and dirt and germs and like bad food for a year. Like, we got to listen to what people are telling us when they get out. And that in and of itself is part of the documentation that we need. We don't need, we're not going to get photographs, but it's really important that we amplify these stories as they come to pass. Okay. Last question for today, which is a really good question. And I'm just going to put a pin in this and say, stick around, because this is something we actually have to talk about. Somebody asked a question today on the Patreon feed about why it is that the vast majority of activism and organizing that is being done in this country, particularly right now, is being done by women. For those of you who have been engaged in voter mobilization or community action or protesting or mass mobilization organizing ever before, you know this, right? That women carry the vast bulk of the labor in doing this kind of work. Okay. Now, there's lots of reasons that we can speculate about why this is the case, right? Like some of it has to do with the fact that women are a marginalized group, right? Some of it has to do with the fact that a lot of us are unwilling to turn the other cheek. Okay. And I have to say that I'm making broad generalizations here because we know that 54% of white women voted for Trump in 2024. So it's not all of us, right? But historically, what we have seen is that when times come for social change, it's women who are leading those efforts in vast majority. All right. So we have a bunch of guys who watch here on the broadcast and, I know who you are. And I have to say this, okay? Like if you as a man are sitting back and watching what's happening and you are disgusted and you are upset and you consider yourself to be at all anywhere on the left, like centrist Democrat, straight liberal, far left, right? You have got to get involved in your local community. Like you've got to get involved in community organizations. You need to go in there and ask how you can help. You need to offer to put your body on the line if you are able to do that, because by the way, white men in particular, getting in the way of police often stops an escalation of violence. We need more men to get involved, okay? And part of it is because, let us not forget, women also carry the vast bulk of emotional and home-based labor in this country anyway. Working mothers do 2/3 more childcare than they did in the 50s, okay? Most of us are either caring for parents or caring for children or caring for grandchildren or already caring for members of our own communities. So we need more help. We need more help. And, again, this is not unusual for this moment in time. This has been the story for a very long time that women, Black women in particular, have carried the laboring oar of democratic and civil rights movements for like decades, for like a century at least. And actually way before that, as I'm thinking back, like way before that. But point being, right? This is not a moment to assume that other people are going to do that work. Like you need to get involved. You need to get involved. And one of the things that I will just say here is that one of the reasons why it's so critical is that the moment that we are in is so profoundly isolating and devastating to marginalized people of all identities, right? And when people show up of privileged identities and offer to help and support and do the work and not take the lead and not step into white savior roles, but actually offer to be of service, that actually helps to create hope. And it engenders a sense of belonging. And it engenders a sense of being seen and witnessed by people who otherwise have privilege. And it also sends a message, by the way, that you're willing to give yours up. for the sake of the betterment of humanity. We need so much more of it. We need like just so much more of it. All right. So I appreciate that question because I see it too. You know, I just have to say that like every single protest that I've been to in the last 5 years at least is like at least 80, 90% women and non-binary people and trans folks. Like at least. I mean, I'm being like really generous with that number, actually. So, you know, please get involved. If you are a man who is watching this, please get involved. Like now is your time. Don't let women do all the labor of trying to rectify this mess of a country right now. All right. Lots of love to everyone. I will be here live tomorrow. There will also be a bonus broadcast for our Patreon subscribers tomorrow afternoon at 3:30. I will see you all there for our usual more of an Ask Me Anything kind of format broadcast there. If you want to get in on that and you're not yet a member over at Patreon, head on over to patreon.com/resistancelive and become a paid subscriber for as little as $5 a month. And also, I just want to remind everybody that at the Ripple Effect Institute, we are continuing to do like really amazing work, like life-saving work with people who really feel called right now to make a big difference at this moment in time in their own zones of genius. People who want to build a nonprofit, who want to use their skills as psychological professionals to benefit marginalized communities, folks who want to build community gardens so that they can feed people who are food insecure in their own communities, folks who are working on abortion rights all over the country. We have an incredible group of people inside there. And if you want to get in on that, you can pick up our guide in the comments below on how to make a difference. And linked in there is an opportunity to set up a free strategy call to figure out if the Ripple Effect Institute is right for you. All right. Lots of love, everybody. Thumbs up, please subscribe. Drop me a comment if you're watching after the fact. And I will catch you all here live tomorrow at regular time. Thank you so much. Hang in there, folks. Let's keep going. All right. Bye.